Hello everyone, it's Jeff. Welcome back to my video. We're in the basement today, making this video here for my buddy Brad's sub contest. If you haven't checked out his channel, it's H2 Vinyl. I highly recommend you go over there and check his videos out. They are awesome. And Brad's a good friend of mine, and he just hit 100 subs. I think he's gone over 100 by now, but his contest is for achieving the 100 sub level, which is awesome. Congratulations. And he did a contest where you had to talk about what drove you to the music that you love. I think I understand the concept pretty well. I may not be explaining it as precisely as he does, which if you watch his contest video, you'll have all the further details there. But the main gist of it is what was it that got you into the music that you love? And this is pretty much right up my alley, because being slightly OCD about things, usually whenever I discover an artist or a whatever, even like things like a comic book series or an artist or a musician or an actor, and I like them, I become obsessed with them. That's just a term for me that I just use, saying that I've just totally dove into their work. For music, it's these guys right here. That's why I'm sitting next to this giant poster of the Blues Brothers, and I can't fit it all in the camera, so I'm going to lift this up. You can see how big this thing is. It's almost as tall as me, and you can read the famous quote there at the bottom. There's got to be some Blues Brothers fans out there, aren't there? There has to be. These guys are great. They're classic. And I've had this poster, for probably 20 years. And it's dry mounted onto a board, but that board is starting to warp. So I need something to keep it flat on the wall. But for now, I took it down so I can show you guys what some of my earliest influences were, funnily enough, as these guys are, and the movie, which I practically have memorized, line by line, song by song. And that's where I first discovered blues music, basically. I trace my love of blues music back to these guys. When I was all of 10, I think I was 10 when this movie came out, 9 or 10. And I didn't know what it was. I mean, I knew who Jake and Elwood were, but I didn't know the music they were playing, the history behind it, or who all the other people were in the movie, like James Brown, Aretha Franklin, Cab Calloway, Ray Charles. Even John Lee Hooker makes a cameo appearance playing Boom Boom. And I didn't necessarily know what all that was, but I knew I liked it. But the only problem is, being a 10-year-old kid, I couldn't run right out and buy those records. So I don't have a lot to show from that era, except I did eventually go out and get, in later years, this album here, the Blues Brothers Briefcase Full of Blues. This was a live album that they did, which I think came out before the movie. Yeah, so as weird as it sounds, the Blues Brothers were a big part of my of my musical makeup, I guess, upbringing, DNA, whatever you want to call it. And I don't have a lot of records. I don't have a lot of blues records really to show that I can trace to this directly. Like, I have like one James Brown album, but that's it. I don't have any Aretha. I don't have any Ray Charles. I have one John Lee Hooker, which I know I showed recently, but that was way before the Blues Brothers movie came out. But yeah, when I saw these guys, I became obsessed with them, and I had to find out more. And nobody was listening to this stuff besides me that I knew. None of my friends. I mean, they liked the movie, but as far as the music goes, that's kind of where it stopped. They didn't really get into the music as much as I did. Which has been a running theme throughout my life. I've never really listened to stuff that's current and cared for it as much as I did stuff that was older. I think the only exception to that, and that's what leads to my next stack of records and story, is I mentioned this before in a video that I used to like the show Solid Gold. And for those of you who might remember that show, it was basically a variety show that had, you know, different singers and bands of the day on there. And they had a troupe of dancers called the Solid Gold Dancers. So throw a 10 or 11-year-old boy into that mix watching those girls dance, and you'll know why I was a fan. And I'm sure a lot of others that are out there know what I'm talking about, and we're fans too, maybe. But in any case, tying it to the music, I saw Hall & Oates on Solid Gold singing Kiss on My List. And although their Greatest Hits album was the first one that I ever got, which I've shown multiple times, I'm not going to show it again. I did end up going back not long after that and getting a bunch of Hall & Oates albums, starting with the album that had Kiss on My List on it, Voices. And there is several other radio hits on this one too. But I originally had the 45, and I played it to death. Literally played it to death. So much that I don't think I have it anymore. I think it's gone. I literally wore it out. When they say you wear records out, I did. And then, not too long after that, they came out with Private Eyes. And of course, the title track, Private Eyes, was another 45 that I used to own. And I wore that one out too. Show you the back here. Kind of cool looking. But there's another song that they released, I think it was like the third or fourth single off this album, called Your Imagination, where the 45 version was different than the album version. And it drove me crazy for years, because the 45 that I had was the version that I really liked and the one that I wanted to listen to over and over, much more so than the album version. And it wasn't until I finally tracked it down online, because I could never find the 45 of it again, and I just couldn't find the song anywhere. It was only available as that. So that was just another little bit of trivia. After that, oh, here she comes, Maneater. It's the big hit off of H2O here. The album so hot that it's literally sweating. This was another big album of theirs. Another favorite of mine, easily, H2O. And then, of course, in 1984, you had Big Bam Boom, which had Out of Touch on it, Method of Modern Love on it. Almost, I love this album front to back. This is almost a greatest hits unto itself. This one here. And then, of course, finally, the live Hall & Oates album where they toured with David Ruffin and Eddie Kendrick of The Temptations. And of course, I kind of knew who The Temptations were, but once I listened to the medley of songs that they did here, that got me into The Temptations music to a certain degree, somewhat more. But yeah, this whole run of albums were big for me in growing up and and really got my interest into music as a whole fired up. But like I said, everything traces back to these guys that weren't my parents. Of course, they were musical influences as well, but once you get past them, it all starts with Jake and Elwood for me. As crazy as it sounds, I know. And while I was in grade school on into high school, I know everybody else was listening to Prince, a lot of hard rock / heavy metal, you know, Van Halen, Sabbath, Twisted Sister, Quiet Riot, of course Def Leppard was big. And while I kind of liked it, it was okay. I think I like it better now than I did then. But at that time, being the weirdo that I wasn't listening to those bands. I was listening to the Beatles. So, you know, I was buying albums like Rubber Soul, Revolver, Yesterday and Today, Sgt. Pepper, the White Album, Abbey Road. I forgot to pull Let It Be. I should have pulled Let It Be too, but I don't know what. I forgot to pull that one. But that one counts too. So when the current music was metal, I was listening more to classic rock when that format was first becoming popular, I guess, as a lot of those albums hit like the 20-year mark and more. And as time went by, I slowly worked my way through, you know, the Beatles catalog, the Stones catalog, which I don't have very many Stones vinyl to show you. And then I bought my first Walkman, and that introduced me into the world of cassettes, which, of course, I don't have anymore because I have no cassette deck or anything to play it on. So all my cassettes went bye-bye. But I remember every week for like 9 or 10 weeks in a row, I went to Music Town in the mall, and I would buy cassettes of Led Zeppelin albums. I don't have all the Zepp on vinyl. I think I have pretty much all the ones I want. There's only a few that I'm not really interested in getting, but I distinctly remember buying, you know, Zeppelin 1, Zeppelin 4, Houses of the Holy, Physical Graffiti, and then my buddy actually gave me this album. This was the only Zeppelin album at the time that I didn't have on cassette. I had on vinyl because he gave it to me. This was The Song Remains the Same, their live album. And it seemed like nobody was into these guys anymore in the 80s, you know, because Led Zeppelin was a 70s band. So even though the music was good, there weren't too many people that were into them like I was. So doing a video like this talking about your musical drive, like what drove you into the music you liked, I was completely out of step with what was current. So that's just the way things went. But yeah, nobody was listening to blues when I was in high school. Nobody was certainly not listening to Hall & Oates when I was in high school. And Beatles and Zeppelin, a little bit here and there. I mean, that I didn't get completely laughed at. But if I told anyone that I liked Zeppelin or the Beatles or the Stones, you know, you still at least had some cred, musical cred back then. But yeah, everything traces back to these guys, Jake and Elwood. And of course, let me move this out of the way. You can see I'm going to move the tripod up here a little bit closer. You can see my Pink Floyd wall here. We've got, this here is the if I can get very close. That's the tour poster for the Roger Waters show that I went to. And then you've got the wall, of course. I used to have a poster that would have covered this entire paneled wall. It was gigantic. And then over there, there's some glare on it, but that's the David Gilmour tour poster that when I saw them back in 2016. Fun with tripods, right? But yeah, I hope this kind of covers the parameters of the video for you, Brad. I think I've told the Hall & Oates Solid Gold story before, but I don't think I've ever told the Blues Brothers one or the Beatles and Zeppelin one. But for me, like, even to this day, even when I see, you know, people on the VC show records, and it gets me interested in what they're listening to. And nowadays, it's a lot better than it used to be. I mean, now I can at least search it out online and sample it first, you know, just to see what it's like, even if it's not a needle drop in the video. Back then, you were totally blind buying stuff. I mean, you could maybe play a 45 if you wanted to hear, you know, some of the song, you know, to make sure there were no skips on the record, but it's not like you could just stand there and listen to a whole album, you know. So it's a lot better today than it was back in the day. But yeah, discovering music was pretty haphazard, and I kind of went my own weird way, which wasn't what everybody else was doing. Of course, you know, these days I love Prince. I've got some of his records, but back then I just didn't do it for me. So yeah, I hope this covers the spirit of the video for you, Brad. It's pretty much all I've got. So I'm gonna leave it here, and once again, congratulations on 100 subs. You deserve it. And I hope you get a ton of entries in this contest. So I've already watched a couple entries, and they're pretty cool. So hopefully I can add mine to the list. All right, guys, that's it for now. This is Jeff. Take care, and I'll see you again soon.